Welcome, everyone. Glad you could all tune in for the second day of our Neighborhoods Now Summit. I'm Dan McPhee, Executive Director of the Urban Design Forum. And on behalf of the Urban Design Forum and Van Allen Institute, I'd like to welcome us all back for a second morning of conversation around reopening New York City's neighborhoods. For those tuning in for the first time today, the Neighborhoods Now project is a rapid response initiative to support community organizations in hard-hit neighborhoods as they define their reopening strategies. For the last 4 months, 175 experts in design, law, finance, engineering, graphic design, and public health have been providing pro bono guidance in 5 neighborhoods: Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, Jackson Heights, Queens, the Northwest Bronx, Washington Heights in Upper Manhattan, and the Lower East Side. We're gathered here today to hear our community partners' visions for reopening the city, as well as our working group's progress to date. We want to start by reiterating our sincere thanks to our 8 community partners for their incredible partnership. So thank you to Medina, to Rachel and Dernest, Yvonne, Jackie, and L'Oreal, Steve and Daniel, Jim and Brendan, Sandra, Leslie, and Ryan for your incredible service to our city and for sharing your perspectives with us yesterday and today. We should be doing everything that we can to support organizations like these in the immediate and in the long term. They're connected to tenants and residents, to small businesses, to cultural and civic organizations, to schools and faith-based institutions like no one else. And they really do help our neighborhoods thrive. If it weren't for Zoom, I'd demand some thunderous applause for you all, but instead I'm just gonna have to say thank you. We also want to thank the 175 individuals across 65 firms who provided guidance over the last 4 months across our project. We can't wait until we can all gather together so we can thank you in person. It's been such a joy to work with you all over the last few months, and we owe you a party. The Forum and Van Allen are eager to continue supporting you in any way that we can, particularly as the uptick in cases and sweater weather begin to shape our reopenings. We'd also like to thank our leading sponsors for their foundational support for this project: Pat Swan of the New York Community Trust, Jamie Von Klemper and Hannah Kassem of KPF, Greg Scheffelbein and Francis Liu at City Community Investing and Development, Carlos Naudon, Madeline Marquez, and Steve Hamilton at Ponce Bank, Elaine Dovas at Apple Bank, and Jared De La Valle at Alloy. There are so many other firms, banks, and foundations who have supported our effort, and we are immensely grateful for your generosity. Thank you. For those of you who tuned in yesterday, you know the drill. My partner, Deborah Martin at the Van Allen Institute, will join each of our community partners for conversation before turning it over to our working groups for presentations. And so with that, I'm going to welcome my partner in the effort, Deborah Martin, to take the reins.
Okay, Dan, thank you. And adding my thanks to all of those who participated and supported this project and to our community partners. Yesterday, we heard from Sandra Lobo of Northwest Bronx Community Coalition, Leslie Ramos of Jackson Heights 82nd Street Partnership, and Ryan Gillum of Fourth Arts Block serving the Lower East Side. Each of these passionate, committed community leaders have been working tirelessly to meet the needs of their communities. And in many ways, they shared a particular perspective about how we came to this point, that the deep inequities that were made plain by the pandemic have always been there, and that the baseline civic investment necessary for health, and by health I mean both social and economic health, those resources that are considered standard in other communities haven't been equitably invested in their communities, and that the outcomes of the pandemic that they experienced and they were painful and simultaneous, right? So the explosion of the virus, the economic fallout, then the resultant social misery, those were rooted in racial oppression and discrimination from the beginning. Yesterday, I mentioned how when we kicked off this program back in June, Marika Williams, who's executive director of the Association for Neighborhood and Housing Development, observed that offering help alone isn't enough, and that how help is extended matters. She said, many of our communities of color have a lot of prior experience with people, organizations, and government designing for communities and not with communities. So with Neighborhoods Now, we tried to design with, and you'll hear a lot more about that this morning. Yesterday, we also heard from 3 design teams who worked with Sandra, with Leslie, and with Ryan. Those teams listened carefully to their community partners, not just about what they needed in the short term. So not just about like the restaurant barrier and the ventilation system and the like, which were all critical. They also learned about the systemic challenges that our community partners face every day. And they thought deeply about how design responses to the pandemic might build capacity in those neighborhoods for the long term. And they might also build, and the work, as they work together, they might build new bonds of trust and support across communities that could persist after this is all over. And that's our greatest hope. And we're going to work to support that outcome. So let's get started. Today, we're really excited to hear from our community partners, Rachel Joseph and Ernest Sinkler at the Bed-Stuy Restoration Corporation, Medina Sadek of the Bed-Stuy Gateway BID, and also Yvonne Stennett of Community League of the Heights in Washington Heights. For those who've been tuning in all along, there are a couple new community partners with us today, Daniel Weinberg with Cooper Square Committee and Brendan Mitchell with the University Neighborhood Housing Program. These are two organizations that support housing security for some of our city's most vulnerable residents, and their organizational needs to be able to continue supporting housing security at a moment when we all know that housing is increasingly fragile. What they need is building specific as opposed to the broader neighborhood challenges that we heard about yesterday. So we've paired them with some outstanding firms, and you'll hear from them as well. As we did yesterday, we'll begin each segment today by carefully listening to our community partners to understand their history, their culture, and the economic context for the work to be presented. So with that, I'd like to welcome Medina Sadek, who is our partner at the Bed-Stuy Gateway BID, and Rachel Joseph and Ernest Sinkler from the Bed-Stuy Restoration Corporation. If the three of you could turn on your videos, and we'll have about 10 minutes to chat. Hi, Medina.
Morning, good morning, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank
And do we have Rachel and Ernest as well from the Restoration Corps? You guys have your video on? Because I don't see you yet. Let's see. Rachel, Ernest, Bed-Stuy Restoration, could you give a yell? Okay, you know what? Medina, I hope they join us, and we're gonna, introduce them when they do, but let's get started. Can you tell us a little bit about, I want to just say that we know that you recently are moving on to, you've left the Bed-Stuy Gateway BID, but you've been a terrific partner for us and a terrific leader for that community, and we want to make sure that we learn what we can from your experience there. So just to get started, tell us, what is the Bed-Stuy Gateway BID, what do you do, and who do you serve?
Okay, so thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for having me this morning, and thank you to all of my my teammates from Moody Nolan who were so generous to us in this project. The BID, a business improvement district in New York City, is sworn into law. So that means that we are a nonprofit that are in partnership with the government, with the city virtually. And so our main partners are the Department of Small Business Services, NYPD, and of course the Department of Sanitation. Our role in this 29 block area along Fulton Street from Troy to Classen and along Nostrand Avenue from Halsey to Atlantic, our aim is to help the businesses to grow, to thrive, to make more money, to make our district a place that is good for any business to come. And so I've been at the BID now for approximately 4 years, but I've been doing BID work and merchant association work for the past 15 years. And Bed-Stuy, I don't know if people have seen, is in the papers this morning as one of the coolest neighborhoods in the country. And no, well, actually, we're comparing us with neighborhoods throughout the world. So Bed-Stuy is really a cool neighborhood. And what makes it cool is the architecture and the people. The architecture is awesome. It's dreamy. I don't have a background in architecture, but I know how to appreciate it. And you just could stare as you drive through or walk through the neighborhood. It is beautiful. And the beauty of it, I think, it goes back and forth between what the people bring to the community and what those buildings bring to the people. And so our community is made up mostly of people of color, mostly African Americans and Caribbean people. And that flavor is felt and seen throughout the neighborhood.
So I have to say, I was in Bed-Stuy not long ago. I met someone who lives in Bed-Stuy for dinner at a place on Lewis Avenue that had some tables outside. And, you know, there's a lot going on there, at least from that evening experience that I had. It was super busy. Tell me, what's your perspective, Medina, on how the community is doing? Well, besides being really cool, as we now know, is
it is, and we didn't need anyone to tell us.
Yeah, right.
You can feel the art and the culture everywhere you walk in Bed-Stuy. Within the BID boundaries, we are trying to come back. We were never a district of a lot of sit-down restaurants. We didn't have a lot of that. And so what we had were a lot of smaller, independently owned retailers, a lot of beauty businesses. And so they are back open and doing the best they can, opening slowly. We were honored with a Black Lives Matter mural in June, around Juneteenth. And so that Black Lives Matter mural has maintained the street, Fulton Street, free of vehicular traffic, and that's had some impact on the businesses as far as they're concerned. In every part of the BID, there's a feeling that there's been an impact from not being able to so-called fully open, as we don't have access to public transportation like we used to.
Can you talk more about that? Like, did the work of the Neighborhoods Now team connect with that challenge?
Well, you know, the Neighborhoods Now team came to me talking about the concrete, the visible needs. So we were talking about reopening restaurants on their sidewalks on the side or in the street with the open street concept. We were looking at those type of things, and a lot of our newer establishments have taken advantage of it. However, other businesses that are not restaurants have had a hard time. And as far as I know, the street will be opening next week. But it's been hard to dedicate the community to the Black Lives Matter movement without thinking of the impact on the commerce, and that this was and is a commercial district.
So looking forward, what would be most helpful? What are your kind of best wishes for the community in terms of reopening safely long-term, and even any thoughts you might have about what the Neighborhoods Now team and Van Allen and the forum can do to support the Bed-Stuy community?
Well, you know, again, they came in looking at the concrete and the things that were obvious. Making sure there was 6 feet between customers, setting up plexiglass, things like that. One of the things that was especially helpful was that the Neighborhoods Now team went into work at a large mosque here in the district that is a historic mosque that was struggling with bringing people back in. And as you know, the mosque has 5 prayer times a day. And so there was always that issue of how do we maintain people coming in and out of the mosque. And the team at Moody and Nolan they've been excellent. They were the right people to go in and work with the folks at the mosque who were a little bit suspicious of outsiders. But one of the things that the Neighborhoods Now project, I think, learned and maybe have to be prepared for is that it's not as simple as things look on the surface. That on the surface you say, oh, okay, you know, at least for myself even, we look, oh, we have to sweep the streets. But we don't look at why is the street dirty? Why, after you sweep the street today, is it dirty again tomorrow? And I think that what the Neighborhoods Now project came to find out was that we had to work and be prepared to work on things that were not always the most obvious.
Yeah.
So that we're thinking it's a simple response when really it's complicated and has a lot of moving parts. So for instance, yes, some businesses were able to put stuff outside and reopen. And then there were some that have not been able, and we're gonna lose a lot of businesses. But I think that more than anything else, Neighborhoods Now has to be prepared to go deep. That sometimes these changes are not on the surface, that these are deep dives, and that, you know, you came in with a very quick deadline. You know, we're going to do this in 90 days, and these are not 90-day issues if you're going to really make a substantial change. And as I always say, moving things from point A to point B. It sounds like you're just going a short distance, but there are reasons that may not be so obvious to everyone as to why certain things are the way that they are. And once you get into that, if you're willing, then you find that it's just not as simple as we hope.
Yes, I think that's exactly right. And that was the reason and our hope that bringing on legal experts and others would deepen the approach. But I hear you, and you're right that this is a long-term investment that needs to be made. Now, I understand that Dernis Sinkler from Bed-Stuy Restoration and Rachel Joseph are here without video, and we do need to turn to the next segment of our program. But I wonder if Dernis or Rachel, if you might just quickly tell us who Bed-Stuy Restoration is, what you do, and who you serve. You know what? If we don't have Dernis or Rachel, then I think perhaps, and Medina, I'll ask you to come back at the end. We're going to then go into the presentation of the work. Rachel, Dernis, are you there? No. Okay, fine. So I think we'll now move on to the presentation of the work. The group that's presenting first, as you all heard, there were two teams working in Bed-Stuy, one with Medina and the Bed-Stuy Gateway BID, and the other with the Restoration Corporation. We'll hear from the Restoration Corporation team first. And I would ask those of you on that team to just begin, because we didn't have the benefit of hearing from the restoration folks themselves, if you could just begin by saying who they are and what they do for the people. We have about 250 people in the program right now, and not everyone will know who Bed-Stuy Restoration is. So I'll invite those members of the Bed-Stuy team to turn your videos on. The team included KPF, James Corner Field Operations, and Farzana Gandhi Design Studio. So from that team, please welcome Hannah Kassem, Lisa Switkin, and Farzana Gandhi.
Thank you, Deborah. I'm just going to take a minute to thank everybody for being here and for the effort that's been put into this project. As Deborah mentioned, this group, this team is made up of a few entities: James Corner Field Operations, Farzana Gandhi, AE Superlab, and KPF, leading the effort. We were fortunate to be part of the conversations really early on with Deborah and Dan, and in terms of formulating the goals for this project and this effort. And I'm really glad to see the full arc of it and see how much has been achieved, hopefully more going forward. But it's really fantastic to see this come together. And I want to thank everybody that's been involved, including Rachel and Ernest, very much so, for their support along the way, for the open conversation that they've encouraged. They lead the Bedford-Stuy Restoration Corporation, and I'm sorry that they were not able to present on their side, but maybe they'll jump in towards the end of ours. Next, thank you. Slide that talks a little bit about, I just want to talk a little bit about the scope of our work and how we broke it down. But really, we thought about it at various scales, at the tenant scale, at the buildings, the block, the street, and then the neighborhood. And each one of these scales has a different mode of operation, different set of conversations that pertain to it, and different time frame that it can be applied. So next, please. In the short term, these are all in progress right now, happening. Signage, pamphlets, the safe reopening of buildings, very immediate. Graphics and wayfinding, barriers that allow businesses that can operate outside to operate outside, food and beverage, etc. And a community build day that will be happening sometime mid-October. And then more on the mid to long term and next steps beyond that are Adopt a Square murals, the program that involves greening and seating, use of rooftops for outdoor space that encourages wellness in a safe manner, and reimagining the streets, and this idea of being a good neighbor, the land swaps that could happen within the community that could optimize uses of the land that is available. And then, of course, arts and community partnerships, which have been really invaluable to us. So Farzana and Lisa are going to take these two chunks of the project going forward and dive a little bit deeper into them. Farzana?
Thank you, Hannah. I'd like to begin by commenting on some of the unique aspects of our team and structure. Here you see Restoration, the block that it owns as a solid line within the heart of a larger Bed-Stuy Gateway BID represented by a dashed line. So this relationship is not just a physical and geographical one, with Restoration being the heart of the Bed-Stuy community, but speaks to the Restoration's long-standing commitment to the neighborhood through the services that it provides. So our charge as designers was twofold. A safe reopening strategy for a landlord and tenant restoration of a block within Bed-Stuy, but also the same for the community it serves. And so what this resulted really was a story of very deep relationships, one of building trust and building community through deep collaboration and engagement at several levels. So internally, our design team was fairly small, and we were able to work not within silos of particular projects assigned to each one of us, but rather, I would say each one of us has a stake in all of the projects being proposed. While we did bring certain expertise to the team and led certain efforts, we really brainstormed together, had feedback from our partners together, and implemented and started to implement together. With our client, Restoration, these are some images of the block. Some open spaces that are public, as well as a large, robust development of buildings. And so here, our relationship with Rachel and Ernest was completely seamless. We met with them every week, and we solicited feedback, but also worked with their team. So Restoration Arts, Brooklyn Business Center, and even their social media and events team helped us start to implement some of our initiatives. As you can see, the block is within the larger neighborhood, and really what we propose on the block matters and wants to be consistent with what's across the street. And here we started to reach out to both the Gateway BID as well as the BID team so that a cohesive fabric of initiatives could be made. And then finally, with the community, I would say that our community engagement campaign was a very robust one from the very start. My firm and my team led this engagement with over 25 stakeholders through several Zoom meetings and other individual meetings with individual organizations. And this engagement continues through workshops and also door-to-door with various community residents. But essentially, these stakeholders represent a cross-section of the community through the organizations they serve, whether arts and culture, small business, education, religious organizations, community boards, council members, city agencies. And really, it's about working together to develop a holistic vision of implementation through a series of complementary projects that can reinforce and build on top of each other. And so we started by learning and hearing and listening. So what we heard were issues with COVID compliance, inconsistent signage, long queues, even pre-COVID issues of trash, deliveries, congestion, lack of shade and landscape, lack of access, lots of vacant lots and vacant storefronts, and really a community that was starved of safe spaces for events and play. And we received feedback not only through our meetings, but we made our meetings public and really on Facebook Live sessions and the like. And we started to collect feedback from everyday community residents. And we offered opportunities up about programming and DIY furnishings that could help with social distancing and reclaiming sidewalks and greening our spaces in an effort to provide a safe reopening. The social media outreach was 21,000 community residents strong. Links were distributed through our partners to various constituents. Over 820 people tuned in live. 60 and more are continuing to engage directly. And these are being reposted on various social media channels across. Some key takeaways were about clear communications, right? So I'll start by offering some of our short-term strategies. This is some signage from our friends at Partner and Partner that have started to populate the neighborhoods already and offer clear guidance on how to reopen. My team also led the design of a series of pamphlets for various constituent groups, office workers and clients, small business owners, and then one that serves the community at large as part of a Be a Good Neighbor program. And these pamphlets, this is just a sample of one. You can download them all on the Van Malen and UDF website. Use fun, clear, colorful graphics with minimal text to demystify some of the guidelines of how business owners in this case could safely protect their customers and their clients. We went ahead and also came up with strategies for some of the businesses in the district, including beauty salons and bodegas with one-way circulation systems, and hair and nail salons, for example, with partition systems and point of sale PPE distribution. And these pamphlets really serve to clearly communicate how all of these things can happen. KPF led a valiant effort for really inventorying all of the buildings on the block and coming up with de-densification and circulation strategies, in and out, one-way flow, and even down to the furniture level within our spaces, so that distance could be preserved within the spaces. We worked with JB&B to provide HVAC guidelines and as well as cleaning protocols and utility tools. James Corner Field Operation has extended the circulation system out to the open space on the block with wayfinding that's colorful and painted on the floor, on walls, and even stair risers, and living decals, as they call it, with potted planters that are color-coded and that actually act as graphic cues and social distancing measures. A big shout out to Blondie's Treehouse for all of their donations. We expect to see some soil, some plantings, and some planters showing up next week for installation. And along with that, AE Superlab from our team has come up with a series of very easy to build using just 2x4s and simple cladding materials, some DIY barriers for planters and waste-based paper baskets that businesses can now start to implement and replicate for their own street-side cafes. I'd finally like to close with Community Build Day that Hannah mentioned, which will be happening within the next 2 weeks, where we intend to start to implement these things not on our own, but with the community. So having community members paint some gridding for social distancing squares on the floor, wayfinding, pamphlet distribution and postering, as well as a workshop to enable and empower small business owners on how to build these barriers. So with that, I'd like to offer this platform to Lisa Switkin, who's gonna speak a little bit about our long-term strategies. Lisa?
Thanks, Farzana. And Rachel and Ernest, you are an inspiration. So I really do hope that you get to say a few words. So as Farzana mentioned, I have the pleasure of kind of introducing our mid and longer term initiatives. all of which depend on sustained community engagement and really a deep collaboration with restoration. And these initiatives really build upon and support restoration's mission and their 4 core centers, which Farzana mentioned before. And the on-the-ground mural sort of outlines here are really step 1 in a larger Adopt a Square initiative. And the idea is that they get filled in over time. Next. The Adopt a Square murals are really conceived as a collaboration with restoration art, and they're meant to encourage, social distancing while building community, showcasing history, celebrating the strength in the neighborhood. And in addition to those on-ground murals, we also hope to do a wall mural potential digital archive or exhibition that would be curated by local artists as a way to memorialize the deep loss in the neighborhood as well. This is the West Plaza. This is really where restoration meets Fulton Street, and it's a primary entrance that really functions as like an informal stoop. And yet at the same time, it can really feel, sorry, are you getting back on this? Can really feel hidden away with a sort of lack of planting. It doesn't always feel so public and welcoming. So you can see here like a number of ideas coming together to really enliven the space, and significant planting and greening efforts, social distancing with the ground murals, the living decals, graphic wayfinding, and kind of a new public facing community stoop. So this is the entrance today. And then a new sort of inviting entrance that really encourages social distancing, directs you to services inside, and in many ways, most importantly, really signals that restoration is open and they're continuing to support the community. So this includes like some of the optimistic messaging. We were really inspired by restoration's sort of motto, "Your home, not alone." This is something that really rings true, I think, for many in the neighborhood. The amphitheater is really at the heart of Restoration Plaza. So this is where people come together to hang out, to celebrate, participate in community events, and also, in passing as they're kind of entering for services. And next you can sort of see the extension of the ground murals, the graphic wayfinding, the additional greening efforts that encourage social distancing and provide a kind of new sense of vibrancy in life. This was something that was important to people, that it's not just about all of the negative impacts of COVID and everything else, but also enhancing all of the creativity and the positive things that have been happening in the community as a response to that. So here you sort of see the amphitheater today, and then a greener, more active and uplifting space that really allows the community to safely come together, and year-round programming that sort of draws people in the, winter months was definitely something that was considered. And we also learned was a kind of throwback to a historical ice skating rink that used to be here. Another idea that we had was about found space. So creating rooftop pop-ups and other public pop-ups wherever possible to allow access to fresh air and to promote mental and physical health and well-being. I think that in many of our conversations, mental well-being was really underscored in this neighborhood as getting considerably worse, with loneliness, with loss, with Black Lives Matter movement, and all of the things that were happening. And so finding ways to help alleviate that and allow people to have access to mental health services as well as space that is more restorative was really important. And this is the rooftop today, which is a large area that's actually accessible via an elevator. And then a kind of new rooftop pop-up that builds off of Restoration Center for Healthy Neighborhoods. This group is really at the forefront of empowering communities to improve access to both healthy food and increase physical activity. Again, we were inspired by the kind of motto of healthy minds and bodies strengthen our community. And so the rooftop pop-up really embodies those opportunities for community gardens, urban farms, and potentially, places to relax and exercise. So moving on to some of the longer term initiatives, all of these contribute to that larger Be a Good Neighbor program that Farzana was referring to. This connective corridor is really about working together to create a network of urban and open spaces that help businesses reopen, that green the neighborhood. I think.
Lisa, you're muted now. There you go.
Yep. It wasn't me.
We're about out of time. If you could.
Yeah, we're almost done. And you know, as was mentioned, you know, most of the businesses along this corridor, they're busy. They're on major and busy streets. There's a lot of traffic, deliveries, buses, and so you know, most of the restaurants are takeout. So outdoor cafes weren't really a priority here, but instead, this idea of temporary street closures potentially. We even had a kind of community brainstorm for a Bed-Stuy smorgasbord, and some names that came out of that were Stuyborg, Smorgasty, Bed-Stuy Yummy, funny things like that. The land swaps is something that we've been working very closely with DOT and DCP, as well as with the community. This is really an idea about retailers or buildings that have, we can, Ernest, I'm just finishing up, that would be, that have extra frontage or vacant lots can share space with those that don't have it. And, you know, some of the things here was also to demonstrate, you know, to kind of extend the open restaurants framework to other uses, such as retail, beauty and grooming, or sit-down social services. And these don't, you know, some of these don't require the city to get involved. The actual proper, you know, private owned properties and landlords can share their space for temporary use, such as this. And finally, we've built an inventory of vacant lots and storefront vacancies that really can be temporarily repurposed. And there's an example at the end here of a vacant lot sort of analysis and inventory and marking out ways for kind of kit of parts for how that could be used. And just wanted to end with just one sort of call out. I think we just want to encourage everyone to be a good neighbor in your neighborhood. And of course, if you're a resident in Bed-Stuy, and that this is ongoing and we're sort of calling everyone to get involved. There are multiple ways to do so. So if you're a local artist or a local resident, or if you want to make a donation, etc., all of these things are ways to stay involved. And our fearless leaders, Rachel and Ernest, have kindly offered their own personal emails to contact if you do want to get involved. Thank you.
Lisa and Hannah and Farzana, thank you for that beautiful presentation, incredible breadth and depth of that work. We're a little behind schedule, but I want to just invite you to unshare Lisa and Ernest. I believe you're with us now. Can you hear me?
I think so. I hope I am.
Oh, good. Yes, you are. And I can hear you. I'm delighted. Great. So let's just take about 5 minutes and you know, we'll just steal that from the future and give you a bit time before we invite the Bed-Stuy Gateway BID team to present their work. If you could just speak to us, Ernest, about the work that you've been doing with this team and about the Bed-Stuy Restoration Corps and your long-term dreams that we've been talking about over the past couple of days, that would be terrific.
Thank you so much. I apologize for the late entry. We've never experienced these type of problems that maybe we're supposed to speak to you at this point and not sooner. So going with that notion, restoration has been in this business of community development for about 50 years. This pandemic has really hit us hard because we serve the public. Our goal is to provide services to help close the wealth gap that exists between people of color and their white counterparts, and to ensure that we have a healthy and safe environment. So this pandemic, as I said, is really been deadly for us, literally deadly. We are currently as a borough, 10th, I believe, in terms of incidents, and 3rd in terms of deaths. And recently we've had a number of hot zones that have shown up in the Brooklyn area. The work that we've been able to do in the neighborhood now is consistent. It's been great. Beautiful people. I would like to give my thanks to the entire group for being so collaborative. I think one of the keys here is that the team did not come with a prescribed notion of how this had to be done. They worked collaboratively with us, and were able to come up with solutions for our specific problems. As I said, we serve constituents at least 3 sites: East New York, Brownsville, and also in Bed-Stuy here on the campus. And so it's necessary for us to provide protocols to ensure that our staff are safe and the people that they service are safe. This initiative, I guess, is reminiscent of things that we've done before throughout history in terms of working with the private sector. Kennedy said back in 1966 that the problems that we need to resolve have to be resolved by community and by private sector. And that notion has continued to be a pillar in our work here in this community. It has been absolutely fabulous working with the Neighborhood Now team. The solutions that they provided will allow us at some point to reopen our sites in a safe manner. We've gone from everything from decals and wayfinding to signage and pamphlets. I think one of the things that has been key in this initiative is communication. In fact, over-communication is one of the key aspects of this initiative. We've been able to speak with the Neighborhood Now teams, various disciplines in engineering, landscaping, architecture, and in return, we've been able to speak with our staff to let them know that we are pursuing best practices throughout this initiative. We are probably going to push back our openings because there have been a number of hot spots in Brooklyn, as everyone has heard, but we will be prepared when the time comes to welcome our community back into our sites and also to welcome our staff back on sites as well. I think those are the key points. Are there other things that we should be discussing? I know that we provided a presentation initially, but I don't think we have time to go through the entire thing. Are there any other aspects of this program that you think we should discuss and that might be helpful? I think the other thing that we're able to do now is speak to other community development organizations and share what we know going forward. We've had many inquiries from our tenants. We have about 40 tenants on site. Some are essential and some have been back for several months. And it's just been great that we've been able to provide a safe site for them. One of the key factors, as you know, this virus is airborne, and we've been able to work with the engineering group, I think JB&B, to just upgrade our filters and also to install air purifiers. Again, these types of measures give a sense of comfort to our staff and also to our constituents. I know I'm talking fast. I feel like I'm rushed.
No, I mean, yes, we wish we could have you we could talk about this all day. This was such an extraordinary collaboration. I want to mention also that we have also your colleague, Rachel Joseph, has joined us today. So I guess what I would say is, I think we need to turn to the presentation of the Bed-Stuy Gateway BID team, but I would ask if you, Dinesh, you, Rachel, and Medina can stick around to the end of that presentation and just share any last thoughts you might have on the work at that time. And again, maybe it was a happy accident that you came in at the end, because it was wonderful to hear your reflection after hearing from Hannah, Lisa, and Farzana and hearing about the work. So thank you for your heroic effort to connect today in the world of Zoom.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Okay. So with that, I want to introduce the team now. As I mentioned earlier, there were two teams working in Bed-Stuy. The one you just heard was about collaborated with the Bed-Stuy Restoration Corporation. Now we're going to hear from the team that supported the Bed-Stuy Gateway bid. That team included Moody Nolan, Büro, Koray, Duman, Büro 5, Lee Architecture, Only If Architecture, Studio Cadena, Whip Studio, Thackway, McCord, Jaklitsch, Gardner, W Architecture, and Grimshaw. And representing that team, I want to welcome Jonathan Nolan, Lindsay Harkema, Lisa Martinez, David Ostrich, and Jasper Singh. They're going to present their team's collective work, and I see you all turned on. Great, thank you. And take it away, Bed-Stuy Gateway bid team. Nice to see you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jonathan Allen, associate at architecture firm Moody Nolan. We're the coordinating firm behind the Gateway BID initiative. I'm here with a great group of design professionals, and we represent the collection of design concepts that were created to support the Bed-Stuy Commercial District and BID. Here with this initiative, in collaboration with several design firms, architecture firms, Moody Nolan, Grimshaw Architects, Jaklitsch, Gardner, architecture and landscape design firm, W Architecture, graphic design firm, Partners and Partners, and a group of design firms known collectively as Design Advocates, which is Büro, Koray, Studio Cadena, Büro 5, Only If Architecture, WIP Studio, Thackway, McCord, and Lee Architecture. Our goals throughout this initiative was to build trust with the bid operations, the participating businesses, and understand the existing conditions of the community. Thus, identify and develop opportunities that can bring communities safely together. Of course, that could not have been done without first understanding the bid. The Gateway BID is a predominant commercial area in Bed-Stuy, stretching more than 20 blocks of retail, beauty, wellness, wine and spirits, and dining. Businesses have been operating in this area for over 30 years. The bid in recent times, as you heard from the Restoration Group and Medina, has been hit hard by COVID. While many businesses struggle to adjust to spatial guidelines in an already compact footprint, sales, maintenance of spaces and equipment, and the safety of businesses has all been impacted by COVID. Our goal was to relieve some of these difficulties by identifying a group of businesses within the bid, as well as open spaces that can serve as a case study for other businesses to emulate and use to prosper. Prioritizing safety, visual cueing, raising the identity of the bid, and providing forms of resource and information, all used to present what we would like to show you now as our interventions. First, with open space architects and concepts, we have David Ostrich from W Architecture. David? David, are you there?
Jonathan, David's on, but for some reason we're having problems with his sound. So perhaps you can skip that part of the presentation and come back to it when he's fixed. Sorry about this.
We got the preview. So then we'll just skip to open space and civic programming. I have Lisa Martinez here. She will present as soon as my computer catches up.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you fine, Lisa.
Great, okay. So I think we'll just pan backwards. So with Grimshaw Architects, our site that we looked at was called Marcy Plaza. So if you skip to the next slide, Jonathan, thank you. So what we first looked at, if you aren't familiar with the area, it's Marcy Plaza, which is the open space kind of public urban plaza between Fulton Street and Marcy Avenue. adjacent to Marcy Avenue, and then McDonough Street is on the north side, and Fulton is to the south. So it's a really interesting part of the Gateway BID. And from the last presentation, we're actually just adjacent to the Restoration Plaza that KPF and Farzana spoke about. So we are, we first kind of began what we would take on as the site analysis of understanding what was existing in the community, both from an infrastructural kind of standpoint and looking at the adjacent buildings, and then also understanding what kind of the activities were going on there. So as an urban plaza, you know, the way that it's used is quite passive in means, but what's been really interesting is that with the onset of the Black Lives Matter mural that was installed in June, this has become a very active point of this part of the community. So we kind of asked ourselves, how do we spread the message of what is within the Black Lives Matter mural, but also capitalize on what is kind of a passive public plaza and adjacent to a couple of really interesting neighborhood resources. So what you see in kind of some of these diagrams are just kind of an analysis of what the types of businesses that are adjacent, such as hair salons, a couple of small scale restaurants, coffee house, and then also a few churches adjacent to the plaza. There's a really beautiful mural at the very top end of the public plaza that has, which is called the Mathematical Star by artist Ellen Harvey. But also this has been a huge point of community activism, and you see a lot of people kind of near and around the Black Lives Matter mural. In a couple of site visits, we noticed that there were a couple of people with street vending. So it's a really active part of the neighborhood. But when we visited, it was summertime. So in the bottom right-hand corner, it was really hot in a couple of locations. So we kind of took all this thinking, and if you go to the next slide, started to understand how could we start to program the plaza itself to kind of capitalize on what's already there, but also provide community amenities and infrastructure to support the types of activities that we saw and that we spoke to community members about. So one of the ideas was kind of brought on by W Architecture to expand the street and to create Marcy Avenue as kind of a walking street, extend that plaza. And then we also looked at connecting and linking the Black Lives Matter mural to the Mathematical Star, which is the lower left-hand diagram. So what you see on the right is actually how we started to think about programming this civic space, and starting to think about zoning areas for things such as a children's playground to provide a safe space for children to play during what was canceled summertime activities, to provide a space for community and art activism, to build upon what was already existing with the Black Lives Matter mural, to provide a zone for street vending, and a place to be a pop-up kind of for community members that might actually have retail spaces further down, but that didn't have a huge public kind of opening. And then also a place for community information sharing, signage. And so what we kind of learned from the way that we programmed this space was that we needed to provide, give shape and structure to the actual programming effort, and to be able to delineate what would be a safe 6-foot distance. So what we came up with, if you go to the next slide, is a couple of series of modules that we designed with the idea of quick erection, low-tech materials that can be easily installed and adapted. And what we found was that scaffolding would be kind of the best way to start to define and delineate space, and that with some plywood seating, plywood planters, ways to actually start to program some of the areas that we had zoned out would be a really great way to provide and to build upon what this plaza already means for the community. So if you go to the next slide, we have a couple of renders of kind of what this means and a couple of precedents so that we had looked at as to how scaffolding can actually be a really, with a couple of installations of art, of graphics, of fabrics, can actually be a really beautiful and active way of creating and defining space that the community itself could become the agents of eventually. So if you flip through. This is a view of the kind of the children's area, children's play. and then keep clicking. There's, I think, one more slide. And finally, some more of the way that the scaffolding was its relationship to what was already existing in the plaza was really important to us to understand. And then some integrative elements like swings, tables, again, planters, delineating 6 feet was really important. And finally, if you go to the next slide, we started thinking about how to integrate some things that actually could be teaching points for the community, such as solar fabric integrated panels kind of for the actual scaffolding to be able to provide places to charge, to provide places to vend and actually power a couple of the things there. And then also, if you click next, we had to make sure that we understood that the 6-foot structure that was set up by the scaffolding actually worked with the way that people could move around the site. So then the way that you could actually move through from one zone to the other was created with a decal kind of setup so that you could know how to move through the space safely. And that concludes our intervention.
Hi, Jonathan. I'm on now.
Great. Skip all the way back. Take it away, David.
Technology sometimes escapes us all. We were tasked with looking at open space, and we took two spots. One, we looked at Fulton Street in front of Restoration Plaza and the BLM mural, and also at Marcy Avenue next. And our goals in looking at the open space was how, in this time of COVID, when people are told to spread apart and in urban areas, that it's counterintuitive to the whole nature of living in an urban environment, which is to share space with each other and to live as communities. We're now being told to pull apart. So we looked at ways that we could expand the public open space. And in that expansion, that we would also encourage people to come to the Fulton Street, participate in use the businesses in Fulton Street, because there was more space they could feel they could use it, and also to really celebrate the Black Lives Matter mural and its importance to the community and people in general. Next. And so what we looked at creating for the Black Lives mural along the wall of Restoration Plaza, which is at the ground level to the first level, somewhat blank, is that we created a palette of gabion planters and wood box seating that could be constructed from scaffolding and easily assembled materials. We wanted to create a pattern along the wall that would facilitate the gathering that needs to go on, for that there is acknowledging that in front of the retail stores such as the bank, the bookstore, and Citibank, that there's a certain amount of lining. So we created a seating along the wall that faded away as we got closer to the stores to the east. Next. And what we created was a series of steps, and those steps allowed to create separation between groups of people seating that could program areas for spaces big enough for one person, 2 people, 3 people, because it acknowledges that though we need to have separation and social distancing, that if you come to this site with a family, that you're not going to want a parent doesn't want their children spread apart. So it allows some gathering of different and allow people to make choices. We also allow the spacing to allow for handicapped seating and associated seating that all can gather together while creating a planted environment that brings color and life to the street. This also allows for using the graphics developed by our team to be placed to show individuals where seats and messages to be incorporated in. Next. And then we also looked at Marcy Avenue as its adjacency to Marcy Plaza and connection to Macon Street and McDonough Street. There's also a number of communities and playgrounds, and we wanted to see that Marcy Plaza, while is how could we expand the usable space? So we looked at a series of options of either taking parking on the side or creating a S shape to slow traffic, and also to create a chance to create additional usable space. Next. We chose a pattern that expanded along the west side of Marcy Avenue to allow that those businesses could expand. And this could be not necessarily for specific space used for specific businesses, but for general, because a number of these businesses are takeout facilities, takeout type of restaurants. The people could not necessarily wanting in front of it. So it allow for general seating. And that also, as Marcy Avenue gets towards Macon, it could be, as we expand there, we could create additional passive park-like areas for people to gather in the neighborhood. And we would also use the same vocabulary of gabions, planted gabions, and simple boxes to create a movable structure, and also something that creates separation for traffic. Next.
Jonathan, we are out of time. David, I'm sorry for interrupting you. We need to move on to the next presentation, but I want to make sure we give your retail team, really they have like 30 seconds or a minute to speak, and then we'll need to move on to the next community.
Yeah, I understand how the times work. Well,
Sorry for having to rush you.
Yeah. Lindsay, are coming from Design Advocates, will you be able to give us something quick?
Sure. Just quickly, the Design Advocates team was tasked to propose ideas for retail in the bid. You can go to the next slide. So our process involved conversations with business owners and within the community, and brainstorming really at multiple scales. So you see here at the largest scale, in conjunction with the ideas about open space and civic programming, a proposal for an exterior infrastructure of standard scaffolding systems to be constructed as outdoor retail stands for local merchants and pop-up markets, and amenities like seating and shade. You can go to the next. So it's a flexible system that would be a temporary infrastructure easily assembled in various locations to support the activities of specific businesses and or signage and display for their sales. To the next. Next slide, please. And then at the smallest scale, we proposed a series of small, easily assembled furnitures that could be used on the interior and exterior of stores. And you can sort of pan through the rest of the slides. So you can see there is also a graphic strategy as an extension of the broader graphic identity for the bid, to support and kind of share the unique identities and histories and stories of the specific businesses within the community.
Jonathan, do we want to hear a few moments from Jasper just to close us out? And I want to say, you guys, heroically fast, and sorry to be rushing you, but Jasper, bring us home.
Okay, thank you, thank you. So John, you could go next. So we worked really closely with a barbershop in Bed-Stuy called Platinum Cuts. And I just want to emphasize that the barbershop in the community is a very important space and place for everyone to come to and meet their friends and catch up on what's happening in their lives, especially for the African-American community. The barbershop is a staple place that people go to. So we worked really closely with the owner, Jerome Arch. And here you have the front of the store where we use the consistent signage that Jerome was very interested in putting out there as well, because he loves his community, so he wanted to participate with that. So John, you could go next. So the main thing here is that Jerome wanted to introduce another chair into the store, even before COVID. So he was a little concerned that that might not be possible, putting up some partitions, but we figured out a way how to do it. So here we have, we relocated the hair wash stations. There's 2 of them. And then we added the new barber chair on the upper level there that you see on the left. Next. So we provided 3 options for the partitions. The first one is a transparent with a black wood framing. The second is semi-transparent with plexiglass and black wood framing. And the third option was metal with plexiglass. Now, Jerome chose the second option here with the black frame and plexiglass. He wanted the black to match the interior of his store that he loves very much. He likes the vibe that it gives off to his customers. So we went with this option. Next. These are the options yes. Next. And here we have interior shots of the store, what those partitions would look like. So the top left there, we have the hair drying stations that we put down numbers on the floor with spacing to schedule where the customers would go and sit when they're ready. The top right shows the partitions as you enter the store because there's a stairway up, and the bottom left shows where the new chair would be, and the bottom right shows as you enter into the store. So as you can see,
it's beautiful work. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Okay, sorry.
Is that your last image?
Yes, that's it. Thank you so much.
Okay, again, thank you, the Bed-Stuy Gateway BID team. Beautiful, beautiful work, and the time that we had for it didn't do it justice, but terrific work and heroic management of the Zoom environment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. If you could unshare, Jonathan. I want to introduce Yvonne Stennett, who's Executive Director of the Community League of the Heights. There she is, in front of her step and repeat. Excellent. Yvonne, we're running late. Yes. So I'm afraid we only have about 5 minutes for this conversation, and it's not going to be enough to do justice for you either, because I would love for you to tell us who is Community League of the Heights, what do you do, and who do you serve? Tell us about the Washington Heights community.
Right, so I think I'm going to be on speed dial right now. So
you've done it before, I've heard it.
Yes. So Community League of the Heights is a 68-year-old not-for-profit organization. We were founded back in 1952. Core to our belief is that we must develop a holistic and rich community around the lives of children so that they have an environment that is healthy, that is prudent, and that is safe for them to grow up. So for all these decades, we have been working with that as the core of our mission. And over the years, we have grown from doing recreation and educational programming now to multi-service approach where we provide affordable housing, educational programming, in that we have created a school, grades 6 through 12. We are doing a lot of work around food insecurity. So we have a food pantry that right now during COVID, we're serving over 2,500 families per week. We also do a lot of work with economic development and the merchants, which is where this collaborative kind of came together around. We've been doing organizing and education and business improvement since the 1990s. It was wonderful to see the work of the Bed-Stuy group, and it kind of reminiscent because back in the early 70s, I actually worked at Bedford Stuyvesant Restoration when they were putting in the ice skating ring. So that was interesting to see. As COVID came on, our community started doing a lot of, it had been going through a lot of economic changes prior, but as COVID came on, our small businesses and our commercial corridors saw great impact. And we were truly in need of a way to bring our community together to start talking about how do we survive? How does our small businesses survive through COVID and flourish into the future? So again, I'm just trying to fast forward because I know we don't have much time, Deborah.
No, but tell us how you're doing and what it is what's the future that you're seeing? Tell us.
So there's a lot of work yet to be done. We have unfortunately lost a lot of our small businesses, but the ones that are here are trying to be very creative about the methods in which they can use to continue bringing in patronage into their businesses. As everyone knows, as the reopening goes, 25% of the occupancy is what storefronts or restaurants will be able to do. We're hoping it goes up to 50%, and we're hoping that some of the strategies that we've been able to look at for the continuation of the outdoor space will help, because 25% occupancy is certainly not what our restaurants need at this point in time to be able to flourish, and they're having really great difficulties around even thinking through that, what that could look like. So the prayer and the hope is that some of the work that the design team has done will allow for the businesses to be able to make it through the winter months and be able to add on to that 25%. Maybe it'll grow to 50. That would be wonderful. But I want to say that this collaborative has been wonderful. It has created a sense of camaraderie among the businesses, among many of the organizations, to give them some hope that there are strategies that they can put in place to survive and to thrive in the midst of COVID. I must add, and I'll definitely say it, I've said it before, whether it was Bed-Stuy or here in Washington Heights, I think that the beauty of what has come out of this partnership is the ability to get the minds and the smartness and the expertise of individuals that we would not on our own have had the ability to bring together to make these kinds of strategies available to our residents. It would have been very difficult for us, and it had been difficult for us to engage with our residents and to be able to support them in the manner that this project is able to support them. So I want to say thank you to all the teams that worked across all the different agencies, because most certainly your efforts are going to go a long way in helping our communities continue to thrive.
Well, Yvonne, thank you for saying that. And, you know, I think I speak for every single participant in this program to say that it's been a privilege to help our fellow New Yorkers in any way that we can. And we're glad that you feel it was helpful, and we're staying with it. So, you know, to be continued, this conversation. I hope you'll stay with us. I'm going to come back to you at the end of your team's presentation for a final word. At this point, I'd like to introduce the team that you, and I want to mention that your colleague, Jackie Tessman, who is now, was our partner in Neighborhoods Now and is now moving on to another position, and also L'Oreal Crowder, who is still, is new and now with Cloth. They both joined us today. So thank you, Yvonne, so much for your comments and for joining us today. And now I'd like to introduce the team that worked with the Community League of the Heights. The working group for Washington Heights included Arup, Woods Baggett, Gensler, Stantec, Barker Associates Architectural Office, that's one name, Abruzzo Bodziak Architects, Office of Architecture, Overlay Office, Park Office, and Smith & Sauer. Speaking for the team will be Zach Postone, Alexandra Barker, David Brown, Gloria Lau, and Kate Watson. Take it away, Washington Heights Cloth team.
All right, great. Just let me know when you're able to see the screen.
We can see it. Looks good.
Okay, great. Well, hey everybody, I'm Zach Postone. I'm from the Urban Planning Group at Arup. And again, I just want to start by really thanking Yvonne, Jackie, L'Oreal, everybody at Cloth for just being such wonderful partners in this effort. And also to Van Allen and the Urban Design Forum for bringing the whole initiative together. So just to orient us a bit, as the Washington Heights team working with Cloth, our focus was really anchored by the key commercial corridors of Broadway and St. Nicholas between 155th and 178th Street in Manhattan. And as a group, our work really grew out of listening to Cloth's priorities. As relative outsiders, we really depended on leveraging the organization's relationships and deep understanding of the neighborhood needs over, as Yvonne mentioned, its 67 years of operation. And so we ended up distilling this into supporting restaurants and retailers, making space for educational programs, and creating a safe and healthy public realm. And I'd just like to highlight that the Neighborhoods Now process, across all the teams, really enabled a type of back and forth between Cloth, the rest of the working group, and city agencies that allowed us to iterate our ideas in response to feedback much more quickly and effectively than typically sending a completed proposal through a typical review process. Of course, we also did come up against some of the challenges of adapting in real time as rules and regulations from the city were updated, and as the city progressed through phases of reopening and into different seasons. Our approach overall was to take the tools that we had developed in response to those focus areas and then examine how they could operate in unison at a few key sites in the neighborhood that we identified with Cloth, and then begin to map out the steps to implementation through ongoing community engagement and follow up with the city. I'd say beyond just trying to advance the specific concepts that we outlined in our work with Cloth, we also found that our work was a useful jumping off point to spark dialogue with new partners. So on the screen, for example, after we completed our initial work, we began conversations with the Community Health Academy of the Heights, which is the school operated by Cloth. And that hadn't been originally part of our focus, but we were able to consult with them on how options for things like signage, temporary outdoor spaces, use of the parking lane, things we were borrowing from other areas could relate to their needs in terms of safe queuing and outdoor learning for the return to school. We also found that elements like the signage, which was distributed to businesses in the neighborhood, had a really important secondary value as a conversation starter, as I'm sure some of the pamphlets that other groups have shared functioned as well, just to really to build stronger lines of communication with the businesses and to better communicate some of the resources that were available through Neighborhoods Now. And I think elements like this help to balance the need to provide immediate resources with a immediate benefit, while also doing the longer term work of relationship building and trust building that's required for developing solutions with a broader neighborhood scale impact. And so I'll pass it over to Gloria at Stantec to take it from here.
Thank you, Zach. So we are looking at the open space through our Stantec effort. So we first try to understand how the community uses the open space in this large neighborhood through a series of network analysis and neighborhood visits. With expanding the open space network in mind and to allow space for safe social distancing, we narrowed down to strategic corridors such as connecting the commercial spines with Highbridge Park and J. Hood Wright Park in the west via Open Street, an area for a series of open restaurants. We serve as liaison between Cloth and DOT to better understand the strength and constraint of the different open street programs. And on the ground, we walked the neighborhood with various community partners and also visited different businesses to really identify areas where we can implement part of this collective open space vision. Next slide, please. Can you go to the next slide? Thanks. So in doing all this, So in doing all this, we are really balancing between the need of rapid response and really also considering the community partners' capacity for maintenance and operation. So for example, shown here in Plaza de las Americas, most of the nearby restaurant is on BC traffic corridor, so they don't feel as comfortable to do open restaurant here. So the idea is to shift to this public plaza as an intervention. So there can be collective sitting and pop-up garden for people to just get takeout nearby or just to take a break in the outdoor space. Combining with an open street program on Wadsworth Avenue, which is right adjacent to the plaza, we are able to expand the public realm by combining various city programs and permits together. So, and now that this program and permits have been extended for a longer term, we are really finding more opportunity in this like ever changing regulation to see how we can implement more of our concept and help the community partners during the winter season and in the longer term.
You're able to see the next slide, right? I think we'll pass it over to Alex Barker from Design Advocates.
Hi. I'm actually part of a group of 5 small firms who collectively is known as Design Advocates. Overlay Office, Abruzzo, Budniak, Smithson Sauer, Park Office, and Barker Associates Architecture Office. And we, as a group, worked alongside with the other typology groups, having conversations with local community members, including retailers, and walking the neighborhood and understanding sort of the way that the existing conditions were sort of the sort of way that sidewalks were being used to have actual DIY retail setups. And so after we looked at after that trip, we kind of started our process of design by thinking about our kit of parts being something that's really focused on off-the-shelf materials and products like milk crates, PVC pipe fittings, shelving components, and greenhouse kits that are easily accessible and assembled by non-skilled labor. And so we are really hoping to take advantage of the city's new open stores initiative and work with interested retailers on setting up their outdoor retail spaces. We are also looking ahead to brainstorm how urban public spaces, specifically closed streets and urban plazas, could be more generally catalyzed to allow for a collective mix of outdoor retail, restaurant, and learning spaces to serve the needs that may become more urgent this fall with the expected uptick in infection rates, and to brainstorm about how, with cooling weather, we can adjust our kits of parts. Next, please. In parallel, we are working on compiling a document to assist neighborhood retailers to quickly and economically set up pop-up stores that can take advantage of the many vacant interior storefronts in the neighborhood. Thank you.
Hi, this is David with Woods Baggett. So we started this process looking at kind of doing the site visits with everyone, talking to local restaurateurs, and doing a mapping exercise to identify locations for installations and potential open street restaurant installations. So we looked at locations of the restaurants themselves, the bus stops, the fire hydrants, and the open space to try to identify these particular locations. And then in consulting with the local restaurants, we identified a number of their concerns and also interests, which included things like safety and congestion of the streets, kind of understanding their particular economic needs, which was kind of varied from group to group. Some groups didn't want to do an open restaurant because it would actually block the pickup lane for people that were kind of driving up to pick up, which is kind of interesting. And then other people that were concerned about the cost of installation and how it was kind of a short term, at least over the summer. And then there were concerns about how this would sort of continue on into the winter and be kind of a longer lasting solution for these restaurants. We identified a couple of sites that we could actually do an open streets restaurant. You can see in the top left, this was one of the sites at between 164th and 165th Street. And for those that aren't aware, that requires three restaurants to actually apply for it. So working with Fried Frank, we kind of developed helped them understand the regulatory framework required to do this. But what we did is we came up with a kit of parts that could really allow for kind of rapid deployment on the site, both in terms of a simple kind of easy to build restaurant typology, some mobile barricades that could be easily kind of moved and sort of collapse for easy storage, and could embed other kind of infrastructure like waste collection and sanitation stations and things like that into them. You'll start to see some of the Design Advocates kind of milk crate furniture kind of pop up in there in order to kind of make some of these areas just a little bit more lively during the kind of temporary weekend activation. let's see, the other thing we kind of identified, so this was all kind of working within the existing kind of framework that was allowed by Open Streets restaurants, but we also identified some restaurants that couldn't actually use any of these, and so we identified sites that set outside the kind of current regulatory framework and put together some proposals for them. It's not shown here, but you know, would to try to kind of help the city understand where some of the challenges were for these particular restaurants. One of the ideas that we came up with was this kind of flat pack open restaurant typology you see on the top right. Maybe Zach, if you go to the next slide.
I think there's a bit of a delay. Did you see the next slide yet?
Not yet. Oh, there it is.
Okay.
And so what we were really thinking about over the summer, because a lot of the you know, a lot of what we heard from restaurant owners was that they didn't want to pay to install this, if they're just going to have to take it down in October. So we started to think about a kind of more long-range solution, long-term solution, and how this could be used over winter, and how you could sort of, you know, take this very simple kind of flat pack idea that is built only with plywood and stuff that can be kind of, you know, prefabricated off-site and then come on and easily implemented on-site without really any kind of skilled labor. But how you could actually kind of augment that over the seasons and you know, allow for there to be proper ventilation from the inside, so that you know, the kind of air can escape, but that we're actually protecting from the wind and allowing to kind of, you know, trap heat from both, you know, kind of propane heaters and the sun. So so this was our kind of proposal for this kind of flat pack solution that could be, you know, easily built and kind of work kind of year round. So now we're hoping to get some more kind of traction with some of the restaurant owners, since we have this now with the extension of the open restaurants program.
Awesome. Thanks, David. And thanks to the rest of the team. So I'm Kate Watson from Gensler. And kind of building on what the rest of the team has been talking about, I think our keywords, we're really thinking about flexibility, this kind of kit of parts approach, and modularity to really meet the needs of the community. So, so as we've been talking about, you know, we really started with talking with Cloth and talking with various community partners and businesses to really hear what were the major concerns. And we really heard from them specifically about the educational needs, and that, you know, children and teens and people of all ages really needed spaces to come together, to learn, to play, and just to hang out. And that was really an urgent need for the community as a whole. So we focused on creating a flexible kit of parts to support that kind of programming, to utilize public space. So you see here, this is you're seeing McKenna Square, which is kind of a really interesting site. It's a parklet that we think can be utilized and really bring together a lot of different partners that are adjacent to this location to really activate this public space in a new way. So what we suggested was creating, you know, simple, flexible physical elements that could create these outdoor kits to be activated in McKenna Square, that could specifically, you know, focus on socially distanced community educational pop-up events. And we created, basically, you see in this kind of middle section here, a whole range of different options for kits that really focus on different opportunities for play, for dialogue, for creation and creativity, and for learning. And these are really made from just super simple off-the-shelf materials, as everyone's been talking about. We didn't want to create anything that was, you know, difficult to find or source, and cost is obviously a major consideration. So we're thinking about simple elements like 2x6s and 2x8s, just really, really simple stuff that could be combined to create these different kits. And from there, we really spent a lot of time talking with different community partners about how we could take these simple elements and create, you know, a series of programs that might look like readings, author lectures, family reading events, you know, stage discussions, dialogues, etc. So all of that is to say, in terms of our next steps, we're really thinking about how we can integrate all of the approaches that you've seen from our group, how we can scale these approaches. Obviously, we've been working really close with the community to think about how to implement this, how to partner in really active ways, and then how to prototype, right? So we really want to think about how to just get our hands dirty and get building and get active. So that's really been a focus. And also, as I think a few folks have mentioned, how to work with the city and the kind of systems at play to evolve the processes in this extraordinary moment, right? We have to evolve kind of the standard ways of activating these types of programs and think about new ways for activating.
Kate, thank you. I'm afraid we have to end the presentation there. Thank you, Cloth and Washington Heights team. Yvonne or Jackie, I believe we lost Jackie. Any last thought?
Yvonne here.
Please.
I'm really, again, I can't say how thankful we are, but I really think that this effort has so much more potential that we have a responsibility to really keep it going. I think as our communities, as our commercial corridors, as our small businesses continue to face the economic pressure that's on them, that if we are able to come up with smart, financially feasible ways to help them survive, then that becomes our responsibility. So I'm looking forward to the continuation of this collaboration. I want to engage with our stakeholders in our community a little bit more, figure out some prototypes that we can actually put on the ground so that others can see it and get more of a buy-in. So I'm excited about the whole project. I don't want it to go away anytime soon because I think it's the public-private partnerships that we create right now that's going to help sustain our businesses and the economy of our communities across the city.
Well, obviously we agree. And I want to say, I think you heard Yvonne from Catherine on our team the other day that there's some more, we've raised some more funds and we're going to pass those funds on to Cloth and the team to figure out how best to use them, and that'll keep coming your way. And I want to say from all of us to you, thank you for your leadership in Washington Heights. It's a really, really difficult time, and to make extra time to work with this team, it's been an honor to work with an organization and individuals who are committed to their community in the way that you and L'Oreal and Jackie are to Cloth and to Washington Heights. So thank you for working with us on this.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
Okay, guys, thanks, Cloth team. And now we're going to invite the representatives from two other organizations. And this is the last presentation of this morning or now afternoon. These organizations work to provide housing services to our city's most vulnerable populations. And so today we have Brendan Mitchell from the University Neighborhood Housing Program in the Bronx and Daniel Weinberg from Cooper Square Committee. So Brendan and Daniel, and I don't see Brendan yet. Is he there? Yeah, there you are. Okay, great. So as you're probably very aware, we're running late, but I'm going to ask, as we discussed yesterday, I'm going to ask you guys if you could quickly tell us who your organization serves, what you do, and then any reflections that you have on the work that we've been doing together before I introduce your team. Why don't you start, Daniel?
Yeah, so Cooper Square Committee was formed over 60 years ago in response to Robert Moses's plans to build a highway through the East Village. And so ever since then, we've been working with affordable housing. We've helped develop some affordable housing. And these days, our main work is helping low-income residents of the Lower East Side and East Village stay in their homes. So tenant counseling, tenant organizing, and then some social services.
Great. And Brendan?
Hi, yes. University Neighborhood Housing Program was formed over 30 years ago, also in response to redlining in the Bronx, and in an effort to create and preserve affordable housing, UNHP acted as a vessel for lending to private and nonprofit community owners so that they could develop buildings that had fallen into disrepair in the Bronx. Over time, our mission has evolved quite a bit. Now we put quite a bit of effort into providing direct resources to folks in the Northwest Bronx in the way of financial resources, connecting them to food resources, and always a focus on housing.
Okay, so if I could kind of put like a parentheses around this, basically you're both providing, both of your institutions are infrastructure for supporting housing for people who may otherwise lose their housing, right? To state the obvious.
Yep.
Okay, so I just wanted to say that just drawing a through line from the other work that we've seen over the course of these 2 days, it's really the focus of the work here has been not necessarily scale, right? Because we've worked on everything from the full community plan, as we just heard in Washington Heights, to now how your facilities actually deliver the services that you're delivering to make sure that people stay in their homes.
Mm-hmm.
So before we turn to the design team, if you could each just share a reflection on how and whether and how it could be improved, the work that we've been doing together with your institutions and with the Neighborhoods Now teams. Why don't you start, Brendan, this time?
Yeah, sure. So, since March, we've had to figure out a way to continue to provide these direct resources to folks in the community. And we were actually, when we initially shut down, in the midst of our free tax preparation program, which we were not able to complete, at least in person. So we had to, figure out who we could continue to see virtually, which put a lot of emphasis on the tech divide. And so as we worked with Neighborhoods Now and the fantastic folks at Cadena and MBB, we really had to figure out a way, how are we going to get people who do not have the ability to, complete a tax return over Zoom or participate in one of our financial coaching classes, virtually, how are we going to bring them these services? And so first and foremost, our office, which is located in the basement of a Tier 2 shelter in the Bronx, typically we have about 12 people working in there, and it's not a large space. And so anytime we have another part-time worker or an intern, we sort of pull up another chair. And it's served us well up until this point, where we really need to put some distance between people in the office. And so the team was able to sort of, narrow down, who had to be in the office, who could continue to work remotely, and figure out a way where we could space people out safely. As far as moving forward, one of the projects that we worked with the design team on is the Rose Hill Senior Apartments in the Bronx. And while we didn't implement the measures that they recommended immediately, we do hope to in the future. And so, our, history tells us that, sort of after they give us these plans, their work is done. And that was not the case. I mean, everyone was very eager to continue to work with us on our timeline, which can, probably be slower than most people would prefer, but we're really grateful.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us, Brendan. And Daniel, why don't you have the last word before we bring on the two design teams?
Yeah. So we have a lot of the same challenges, small staff. Our office is in an old tenement building. So, it's 20 feet wide and 100 feet deep. So, how do people social distance when it's basically one hallway that connects the whole office? So, Curtis and Ginsburg has been helping us to design partitions and where to put air purifiers and stuff like that. And I was really happy to get in touch with you all, because I've been on some calls with the New York City Department of Consumer and Worker Protection, and they do these calls every other week of new guidance from the city. And I asked them, do you have any special guidance for a small community-based organization, nonprofit organization? And they didn't really have anything. They were just talking about the phases and all that. So it was really great to have someone who could come in and say, okay, what are your specific needs and specific challenges, and walk us through that. And, we're still finding new things that we want to ask them about and that we want to ask UDF about. So yeah, this is a beginning of a hopefully long relationship.
We hope so, and we are really happy that this has been helpful to you. I'm going to ask both of you to keep your video on and maybe stay for the last word at the end. But at this point, I'd like to invite the team supporting University Neighborhood Housing Program to join us. They include MBB Architects and Datner Architects, and to present their work, I invite Sarah Grant and Jen Switala to join, and there they are.
All right, hello.
Hey.
1 second here. All right, so as Brendan had mentioned, we sort of looked at 2 short-term goals that UNHP had identified to us that were their immediate needs. We focused primarily on their office space, which is in the basement of the shelter that Brendan mentioned, and then the Rose Hill Community Facility Center, which you can see there's sort of the 2 existing photos. We took the site visits and we listened to what each of their needs were to actually provide a safe working environment and provide a safe space for the seniors to sort of get outside of their apartment and communicate with other people. So our real hope here is that although we only focused on these sort of 2 areas for UNHP, that we would be able to take these short-term strategies and apply them across the different buildings and different services that they provide in the Bronx. We thought that that was really important, that these ideas, while short-term, could eventually turn into long-term goals and strategies across their other projects when they're ready. So first, I'll go over their office space. As Brendan mentioned, it's a pretty tight space. It's sort of grown organically over the years, and they roughly have about 12 employees at any given time, particularly during the tax season. So what we explored when we went to the site was that, obviously there's so many desks in these spaces, and you couldn't really practice social distancing. So we wanted to get a sense of what was actually in there and what could potentially be moved or taken out or reorganized so that, we're not imposing any extra costs, because funding was obviously a big piece for this. So for example, here's an axon of the existing office space. And we took a 2-phase approach to this. The first phase was to take a look at the allowing people to return to work sometime in January, that they can maintain 6 feet of distance and accommodate sort of their operations, but just by reorganizing the furniture and creating sort of personal workspaces and public zones within the office that people could feel comfortable actually returning to work. So we were able to take almost all of their existing furniture minus sort of this large table in the space and reorganize it so that their core employees could eventually come back to work. We're hoping that this work will probably start early November with some of the staff returning in January. This would also include local air purification systems and using natural ventilation to sort of help mitigate the sort of the fact that they're in a basement. And then phase 2, what we wanted to do was be able to actually get all of their employees back into the office. So again, it's taking this idea of rearranging the furniture. We've already rearranged it once. How can we look at it again with incorporating sort of plexiglass partitions to allow staff to have the 3-foot distance, social distance, while wearing a mask? It came down to that same idea of creating these sort of personal work zones where people aren't passing each other, they feel comfortable still working in the office, and then public zones where one person could be at a time. And again, implementing acrylic dividers, all of which, are sort of minimal cost to UNH. We also thought it would be a great idea to incorporate signage as well as potentially repainting their offices. So we had a couple of options for that as well. And now I'll hand it over to Sarah to talk about the Rose Hill intervention.
Okay, great. If you could go to the next slide. So here you see our initial site visit at the Senior Housing Center. Chapter, and we originally thought we were going to focus our efforts on the interior space, but it very quickly became apparent in discussions with UNHP and the senior housing operator that with the limitations on the existing windows and the ventilation system, there was really no intervention that we could envision here that would allow seniors to safely use that space. But what we found was this really great outdoor area immediately outside of this community room. So we shifted gears and focused our efforts on that space. And really what our focus was looking at ways to take this existing space and activate it and allow the seniors to come together safely there. Planting, we heard, was a big interest already of the seniors. So we started looking at ways to use planters in that space and drawing from our experience with accessible planters as well, so that they're raised beds and easy for people in wheelchairs or with all different mobility issues to access. We took a modular approach here. So you see the site plan, and it was important to us that they can build one unit if that's what they're able to fund, or up to 5 units on this site. The other thing to note is that we were considering the prevailing winds and how to extend the season of these modular units so that it could be used immediately as a shade structure, or going into the cooler months could offer some additional shelter and act almost as a semi-enclosed greenhouse structure. We were looking at entirely off-the-shelf parts and using the planting both as something that the community could all contribute to, but also as something that helped provide suggestions as to how to properly distance. Go to the next. It was also important to us that this was a prototype of sorts that could be used at this facility, but also could be introduced at their other facilities throughout their network. So then the next couple of slides just show it in situ, you know, how these are renderings showing how it might be on that one particular site. And then as with the office, we did go through the exercise of working with them to provide a materials breakdown so that we know exactly what would be needed, both in terms of volunteer time, but also in terms of the materials themselves. There's a Fordham University.
Sorry for interrupting you. We need to finish up.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the next slide is the last slide, and it's just saying that we are continuing to work with them around donations and getting this realized.
Thank you. Thank you. Very elegant scheme. And now in our last presentation of the day, I want to invite Crystal Ang of Curtis and Ginsburg to present the firm's work in service of Cooper Square Committee.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Okay, so our team consists of Curtis Ginsburg Architects, which I'm from, and engineers from Thornton Tomasetti. And we had the pleasure of working with Daniel, who you heard earlier, on the Cooper Square office and helping them engage their community once again and reopen their office. Their space is pretty emblematic of our ground floor commercial space and represents the challenges of reopening offices. Their office is located on the East Village, Lower East Side Historical District. And as Daniel mentioned, they're on a typical Manhattan lot that is 25 by 100, which is very deep and narrow, like a lot of their neighbors. It makes it particularly challenging for ventilation, which is critical during COVID. So you can see here their narrow storefront, and they've made the most of their space. At the top, the front has a small reception area and a front office, as well as a part wall that separates their reception area from their open office. Unlike a lot of the outdoor programs that we've seen today, because their work requires some privacy to advise their community and clients, on their housing issues, we focused solely on the interior of the building. The goal of Cooper Square was to get their space safer for their staff and also to meet with their coworkers. It was important for us to understand how they organize themselves within their space. They had a front office, which they had rented out previously and were not using. But in general, pre-COVID, people would check in and people would just meet with their clients at their desk. In talking with Cooper Square Committee, we wanted to limit that public contact and actually create the front office into a consultation room. And that would limit the exposure, the public exposure to this primary office, and improve their existing wall to be a flexible design that would create a physical barrier, as well as allow for short drops off and consultations. In addition to the physical improvements, office procedures that we work with them on, such as scheduling of staff and client meeting, is critical to maintaining the social distance in the office space. Next, we tackled the ventilation. So from their natural existing windows, the only rooms that had adequate natural ventilation were the back offices. The open offices were supplied by shaft spaces and windows on the side, and there was no ventilation for the front office space. So the long-term strategy that we proposed was to provide an energy recovery unit that with a ducted system that could provide tempered fresh air and exhaust, as well as that could incorporate a germicidal UV unit in the exhaust that could deactivate the germs that don't get caught by the filter. The ERV also can incorporate high efficiency filters such as MERV-13 or HEPA filters. But we do understand that these systems are costly. And in the short term, Cooper Square Committee is going to be providing additional portable air filters in their space. For the physical barriers, we had a couple of options to increase the height of the part wall to 8 feet. They range from off-the-shelf systems, just like stud wall or modular cubicle storage units and lightweight framing. And we identified criteria such as flexibility, storage, transparency, and security as multiple different aspects that the different schemes would meet. Ultimately, what was decided was the lightweight with additional transparency to allow more light into the back office space. I would also note that the selection of the system, there was consideration on a furniture piece instead of a fixed wall piece, so we would save time and money without filing with the Department of Buildings. So this is the final design, which is a unistrut system with solid and plexiglass infills that could be reconfigured and moved as needs change. It also allows for a pass-through where people can bring their documents to share about their case, and a bulletin board that maintains the character and community-centered mission of the organization. For the consultation room and reception area, we implemented pretty standard procedures by removing unnecessary furniture for ease of cleaning, placing signage about office policies, providing hand sanitizer, sneeze guard, along with air purifiers. Lastly, because this space did not have ventilation, we felt it was very important to add this. Adding a mechanical ventilation was infeasible to the limited storefront and the length of time that modifications on the facade would have to go for historical landmarks approval. So we proposed the 2 side windows be converted to operable that allow cross ventilation and a potential drop off where the clients could actually be outside. So the key takeaways for us from working with this project with Cooper Square Committee is that small businesses and organizations often lack the capital and least the ability to attempt to make improvements and ventilation upgrades to address COVID on their own. The regulatory cost of approvals and permits and expeditings are costly and time consuming. If the city could help, if there was an expedited small business hub at the building department or reduced fees, might alleviate some of the burden. Just have we have readily sneeze guards available off the shelf. We need to kind of figure out easy retrofit solutions for a small package ventilation and operable windows to retrofit into existing spaces. And for designers, I think it started help getting us to think of what we would do differently when we plan new spaces and allow for more generosity for ventilation for the spaces.
Crystal, thank you. And thank you for making that connection between the design intervention and the recommendations and the policy level. That's really interesting and helpful. Daniel and Brendan, would you like to have a last word about either of your organizations and how you worked with the teams?
Yeah, I'll just chime in that, you know, the operable windows, we're trying to find a contractor for it, and internally we were struggling with it, and I thought, oh well, let's ask Curtis and Ginsberg. They're here to help, so we're asking them. We're working with them, and yeah, like having watched yesterday and today, I've realized all these other areas in which, you know, I want to look to you all for help, like, you know, different technological things that, you know, we're needing as we realize we've got to up our intake and screening and, you know, all the digital things we've got to do now. So yeah, like I said, a relationship I'm looking forward to continuing.
That's great. Brendan, anything else to add?
Yeah, I would just like to echo what a lot of the other panelists said. You know, it was really so refreshing to have, you know, these design professionals sort of come in and you know, and come up to the Bronx and, you know, not tell us what we need, but ask us what our needs are and make, you know, real suggestions that they had clearly spent a lot of time on. It was just, the whole thing was a huge success.
Well, that's great. Thank you both for participating in this project and for sharing your work with us. And we want to make sure you can keep doing it in as robust a way as you always have. So with that, I'll pass off to Dan to end the session today.
Yeah, thank you all. I'm going to close out today's proceedings with a sincere thank you to all of our incredible speakers. Thank you for sharing your experiences and your visions with us. I'm really particularly excited to see how the city's outdoor experience could be radically better after listening today. And thank you to all of our 250 attendees for joining us today and for bearing with us through all of the technical difficulties. I really cannot wait until I can see you all again face to face. As you can tell, our projects are still very much underway. We have so many new challenges to face as the weather grows colder, and cultural organizations and small civic organizations still don't have the guidance or the resources that they need. We're so grateful to all of our teams who have extended their commitments into the fall, as well as our generous funders who have helped us raise now over $100,000 just to implement our team strategies. Our sincere thanks again to Pat Swan of the New York Community Trust, to Jamie Von Klemper and Hannah Kassem of KPF, Greg Scheffelbein and Francis Liu of City Community Investing and Development, Carlos Naudon, Madeline Marquez, and Steve Hamilton at Ponce Bank, Elaine Dovas at Apple Bank, and Jared Della Valle at Alloy. There are so many other firms, banks, and foundations who have supported this effort, and we are immensely grateful for your generosity. If you'd like to help us navigate those challenges or support any of our projects today with a contribution, please do reach out and we'll find a way to loop you in. And in our follow-up email to all of our attendees, we're going to share a new online resource, neighborhoodsnow.nyc, where you're going to find 44 tools developed by our teams, organized into specific categories like HVAC or restaurant barrier that's completely searchable. And these are resources meant for community organizations, public agencies, and practitioners, so please stay tuned for more. Special thank you to Eric, Greg, and the Partner and Partners team for their brilliant work helping to organize those resources. Deborah, I just want to close by thanking you for your close collaboration and partnership across these last few months, and extend my sincere thanks to our team members, Stacey Anderson, Catherine Sacco, Andrew Pasquier, Alicia Levin, Kima Hibbert, Scott Kelly, Kate Overbeck, and Annie Ferreira on our teams who have facilitated our effort to date. It's been a genuine pleasure to work with the Van Allen Institute on this endeavor, and I'm going to urge the whole design and development community to come together in support of essential community partners like ours in the coming months.
Dan, I just want to return that and say the names that Dan just reeled off, like that's it. That's the whole team. And they've been, each person is doing the work of like 5 people, and we couldn't have done it without this collaboration with the Urban Design Forum. So it really has been a delight to do this together. And as Dan said, everyone should be collaborating in this way because it allowed us to do things we wouldn't have been able to do alone. So adding my thanks to everyone who supported this project, who in so many ways that it has been supported.
And with that, let's close out the summit. So stay tuned for more, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.